This segment brought to you by Kansas Corn. Learn more at kscorn.com.
Welcome back to Ag AM in Kansas. I'm Brityne Rucker. A Kansas State University veterinarian is urging cattle producers to beef up their plans for managing heat stress in their herds. And that veterinarian is with me now, AJ Tarpoff. Welcome, AJ.
Thanks for having me.
Now, AJ, cattle will often accumulate heat temperatures, but there are more factors behind that.
There really are. So I think I should start off with all animals, all cattle, all people, we're susceptible to heat. Okay. Now cattle specifically, they're not very efficient at cooling themselves. Okay. Just inherently, they can only really cool themselves through evaporative cooling. And most of that actually comes through when they breathe. Okay. So we'll see cattle pant. We'll see some of these different factors. And that's when we know they're starting to accumulate heat. Now cattle accumulate heat normally. Okay, they can handle that readily. The issues become if they don't have enough nighttime cooling during the nighttime hours, and it generally happens in the middle of the night, and they need about 6 hours of cooling in order to cool themselves appropriately.
And it even comes down to different hide colors.
It does. So not all animals are affected the same way within a group, within a pen, within a yard, within a pasture setting. Certain animals are more susceptible to heat stress. And those animals would be those that are darker colored hides, okay, because they will accumulate more of the solar radiation. Animals that have previously had health insults, if they had pneumonia as a younger animal, if they had any of those issues they've recovered from, they can be more at risk, as well as some of our heavier body conditioned animals. The more fat cover they have, the more insulation they have, the more susceptible they are to accumulating a heat load.
And AJ, by having your cattle stress due to heat, there are some negative effects associated with that.
There's quite a bit of negative effects associated with heat stress. It's been estimated that the cattle industry loses about $370 million a year just due to the effects of heat stress. That has to do with the cattle, they're eating less. Okay, all they're trying to do is cool themselves. We actually have decreased reproductive rates. Okay, so we have decreased fertility during the heat, the peak heat periods of the year, but also some of the direct losses. Okay, some of those animals unfortunately can succumb to some of the stressors of heat. So all of this together, we have decreased performance, hinder on the animal. These are major factors that we battle with year in and year out.
Yeah, and a lot of us think, and you kind of touched on it, but we as humans cool off by sweating, and we might assume cattle do the same and as efficient as us, but that's not the case.
Believe it or not, contrary to popular belief, cattle do sweat. But to put into perspective, they only sweat about 10% of the capacity of what people do. Okay, so it's very inefficient means to be able to cool themselves. Their most efficient means to cool themselves is actually through breathing. And that's why we'll see animals start to pant. They'll be open mouth breathing. And it's actually evaporative cooling instead of sweating. It's through tiny respiratory droplets that are leaving the airway.
And even feeding at the wrong time can actually increase their heat load.
That's a great point. So not only environmental temperature do we have to deal with, but also it's the heat of digestion. Okay, when we feed cattle, we're actually feeding them rumen microbes, and they cause a fermentation process. That entire process of digestion creates heat all the way through. So we call it the heat of digestion. So cattle will actually accumulate heat during critical times of the day, depending on when we feed them. Okay, so the peak heat thermal period after we feed animals is about 4 to 6 hours after the feeding time. Okay, so it's good to understand that because that can change some of our management strategies of how we feed cattle on trying to balance that we're not maximizing the heat of the day along with the heat of digestion. If we feed them later in the evening, we can actually have some of that peak heat of digestion in the middle of the night when it's nice and cool. So we're not compounding some of these factors.
When we come back, I'll have more with AJ with some of the best management practices when it comes to managing heat stress in your herd.
I'm Bob Swartz, and I've devoted the last 43 years to helping Kansans reach their retirement goals and to protect the family farm. At Bob Swartz Financial, we believe everyone should be able to live the retirement they've always dreamed of. Our team of professionals can help you create an efficient strategy using a variety of investment vehicles to help you address your financial needs and your concerns. Bob Swartz Financial values commitment and transparency.
Highways 40, 83, and I-70 come together right here in Oakley. Roads that lead to businesses, to magnificent rock formations, to scenic vistas, to places where legends were made. Roads that lead us home. Discover Oakley, the gateway to western Kansas.
Okay, looks like it's time for our tour. Welcome to the Fort Wallace Museum. Here at the museum, you're going to find some really interesting stuff like our replica stagecoach from the Butterfield Overland Dispatch. We've got facades from the fort buildings. We've got an 1870s flag. There's a plesiosaur that was discovered locally. We've got the Ray pump organ collection. We're a little bitty place with a great big story, and we'd love to have you.
This segment brought to you by Santa Fe Trail Meats in Overbrook. Let us help feed your family.
Welcome back to Ag Etc. I'm back with K-State veterinarian AJ Tarpoff with some of the best management practices when it comes to heat stress you can implement on your operation.
What are some of the best management practices for helping reduce stress in cows? Heat stress?
So that's a great question, and it comes down, I think we should start with what we can control the most easy, okay? And that's us, that's management, right? So when do we feed, when do we handle animals, okay? Cattle generally will start accumulating heat about mid-morning throughout the entire day into the early evening hours. Understanding that is if we have to work cattle, if we have to move cattle, we need to try to do that during the cooler periods of the day, early in the morning, and try to have any processing, cattle handling, or shipping done before about 10 a.m. Okay, so that's where we start. I mentioned changing some of our feeding times. A lot of folks will recommend, and producers will try to target providing about 70% of the feed delivered to those animals in any given day as late in the evening as possible. Okay, and that way we get the heat of digestion in the middle of the night. Some other management strategies that we can implement are some of the basics. Okay, pen design. If we're talking about feedlot cattle, if we can have a nice earthen mound on in the middle of the pen, that allows animals to catch some breezes that may be a little higher elevated than the regular pen surface. Okay, so a nice mound so they can catch the nice breeze that's coming through. Other general cleanliness issues. If we can make sure that we don't have anything occluding wind, and even a small breeze can literally be a lifesaver for some of our cattle in these situations. So making sure that we don't have excess weeds on the perimeter of an operation, make sure that we don't have stacks of hay that may be impeding some of that breeze. That if we can have those, just the general cleanliness to really get some good airflow, that can go a long way. On top of that, there are some other things that producers around not only Kansas, but the nation have implemented to help combat some of these heat stress issues. And that would be utilization of things like sunshades. Okay, sunshades are an investment in in any given operation. One thing that I do want to point out with sunshades is we need to make sure that we have plenty of it. Okay, so unfortunately, if we don't have enough, cattle will group up and they'll bunch underneath some of these shades, and that actually is detrimental to them. But they will seek out the shade regardless. So we want between 20 and 40 square feet of shade access for each animal within the pen. So that's a good frame of mind. Other things are sprinklers. Okay, so sprinkler systems, they're a phenomenal tool, used very heavily in dairy operations, but in feedlots, it's a little bit different. Since these are outdoor environments, we have to be careful how we use these sprinkler systems to get the maximum effect from them. The idea behind sprinklers is, one, to control dust, two, to be able to cool the cattle in the pen floor during the nighttime cooling hours. We really don't want to use these sprinklers during the heat of the day or water too much, or we might actually increase the humidity at the pen level, which could be a detriment to the animals. So we want a big diameter water droplet. So we want big water droplets when we sprinkle, and we want to do that either during the overnight hours or the very early hours of the morning to make sure that we're cooling the pen surface and cooling the animals off before the day begins. Along with the pen surface itself, there's been a few test trials to actually look at pen surface itself. When we have dirt floored lots, that accumulates an enormous amount of heat.
Yeah.
And if anybody has walked through a farmyard or a barnyard, you can almost feel the heat through your boots. It really starts to accumulate heat. So if bare dirt or packed manure will both be about 25 degrees warmer in the heat of the day than something with bedding. Okay, so either wheat or straw, some type of straw bedding, or even baled corn stalks, something along those lines that we may or may not use for feed, but we can use for bedding. So having some nice spread out areas that will reduce the absorption of the heat on the pen surface itself, that can be another management strategy.
Absolutely. And to wrap up, there are a few resources available to producers when beginning that discussion of heat stress management.
There are. So how do we track this? How do we know when we need to implement some of these strategies? There's some very nice forecasting tools that are available to us. The first of which that gives a 7-day forecast of heat stress events that actually looks at temperature, humidity, wind speed, and solar radiation. All of these go into these calculations. One is from US Mark, the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center at Clay Center, Nebraska, has a 7-day forecast for all the different regions of the United States. That's a great thing to look forward the next couple days on when these events are going to happen. The next one that I really like that is a tremendous value to our producers all around Kansas is called the Kansas Mesonet system. And the Kansas Mesonet actually has an animal comfort index that takes into account those same factors that we just discussed that goes into the forecast, but it gives us real-time, up-to-date information on regional stations all over the state of Kansas. And another really neat piece of this tool, the Kansas Mesonet, is that it has a 7-day comfort outlook, a previous 7 days. So with that, I can actually measure nighttime cooling hours. We need cattle to have 6 hours of nighttime cooling. We can use that tool to be able to measure that.
And these tools are super user friendly.
Very, very easy. They're free. They're readily available online. That quick searches for US Mark heat stress and Kansas Mesonet, both of those are very valuable tools.
Well, AJ, thank you so much for being on the program. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Brityne Rucker, and this has been Ag AM in Kansas.